Hi guys, thank you very much for coming on the second day of this roundtable event that had to be happening in Venice if we don't have this pandemic. But I think we did a really good job, and I thank one more time Roberta and Unioncamere del Veneto for this good agenda and for this good roundtable. So basically today we are starting with the topic sea monitoring and prediction through underwater robotics and sensors. For me, this is a very big part of the InnovaMare project because without innovative solutions for sea pollution and monitoring and prediction of sea pollution, we wouldn't have all the innovation ecosystem around it about that topic. So it is very important topic for our project, and I really like to see the presentations and have a good discussion on that topic. Do we go further on with the topic, or I would give a floor to Miss Martina Rossi because she's a moderator as well with me. So Martina, please.
Thank you, Matteo. Good morning to all of you. I think that yes, we can basically start. I would like just to remind, as we did yesterday, that we have an interpreter service. So if you want, you will find an icon which is like a small globe just below, and you can choose the language for interpretation. So you speak either in English or in your language, which I suppose could be Italian or Croatian. So just feel free also to use this this service. And we will say, I would say, Matteo and me will try to stick you and keep you in 10 minutes because I see already some presentations. I know that you have so much content, very comprehensive presentations, but we have to give time to everybody. So we will try to just give you the time. Okay, I think we can start. So if you want to introduce, Matteo.
Just basically, so we are starting, as I said, with the topic, the sea monitoring and prediction through underwater robotics and sensors. One of the key experts in this is Ivana Palunko from University of Dubrovnik. It is a partner of InnovaMare project, and she would give a lecture on marine robotics for sea monitoring in the Adriatic Sea. So, Ms. Palunko, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will start by sharing my screen. So let's see. Okay. Okay, so you see? Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. Matteo, as he said, I come from University of Dubrovnik, and we are one of the partners in this InnovaMare project, and I am very happy to be invited on this roundtable and to tell you something about the marine robotics for sea monitoring in the Adriatic Sea. I will focus mostly on the monitoring and all the activities that are focused on the South Adriatic around Dubrovnik region. That's why I'll tell you something about our, let's say, key personnel or experts at the university. So we are a small and integrated university and mostly oriented towards the sea and the research around it. And these three distinct subgroups at the University of Dubrovnik are doing research in these fields. As you can see, the Department of Agriculture, or newly the Department of Applied Ecology, they're mostly monitoring environmental conditions, marine ecosystems, and agriculture. And Institute for Marine Coastal Research is mostly focused on monitoring of marine and land resources, mostly like focused on plankton monitoring. So these two entities form somewhat like, let's say, technology seekers. And we, as a laboratory for intelligent autonomous systems from the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computing, are somewhat technology providers. So we have a small ecosystem here in a combination where we can form really interdisciplinary teams for, let's say, tackling interesting problems. So for our colleagues from the Department of Agriculture and the Institute for Marine and Coastal Research, we can provide maybe some solutions that they're not aware, they don't have the skills for that. Okay, so agriculture is one of the, let's say, prominent areas that research is conducted. So agriculture is very widely spread throughout Croatia. Most dense is around the Šibenik and Zadar area, but also around Dubrovnik area. So if you can see on the left map, all the dots are mostly placed around the peninsula Pelješac, which is close to Dubrovnik. On the right figure, you can see the area. So the turquoise area is Mali Stone Bay, which is, as you can see, dedicated for agriculture. And all these different, let's say, rectangles are designated for different types of agriculture, from shellfish to fish farms. So this is, and at the same time, some of these areas are protected. So there is a lot of need in this services and research in this area. So why Dubrovnik for the agriculture? So more than half of Croatian shellfish production comes from this bay. Since this peninsula is 21 kilometers long, this bay is very protected. So it poses a really nice area for shellfish farming, especially for Mediterranean, so European flat oyster, which is due to very strict ecological measures in the past, is very preserved in this area, as opposed to the rest of the Mediterranean. And we are, since due to population increase, there is a lot of need in monitoring and preserving this bay intact, so we can continue producing this European flat oyster, which is now even protected. Another area for research that we participate in is in plankton monitoring. So our colleagues from Institute of Marine and Coastal Research started a project from Croatian Science Foundation where they monitor plankton in this like sea basin that is the deepest point of Adriatic Sea. These are experiments we conducted with them this summer in, I think, June. The trick is here that in standard sampling, they use plankton nets, which you can see on one of the videos on the right, or these, let's say, tanks, which can capture samples at different depths, depending on what you set for the sensors. But in this project, they're interested in, can we use, let's say, marine technology, so robots or just sensors, to sample some other type of plankton that cannot be captivated in these traditional instruments, like some of the zooplanktons that can escape, or like these jellyfish type of zooplankton that it's very delicate and it can be destroyed if it's pulled with the net or with this buoys. These were some preliminary trials, and we will continue in the next couple of years to see what we can help them with. It is an interesting problem from technological perspective, and also from the marine perspective, so they can see the volumes and calculate how many of these organisms live in this area. Okay, and another topic that is interesting for this is marine pollution. I won't go into details because Neven Cukrov already had a really nice presentation yesterday. I would just point out that Adriatic, since it's very closed, is, let's say, a problematic part, especially for a litter. And due to the currents that we are all aware of, how they are spread throughout the Adriatic, Dubrovnik is a very affected area. So considering this, the ugly figures on the right side is basically during summer, we can have a couple of times a year during the strong south winds, these scenarios in our city port, which, I mean, this gets cleaned in a couple of days. So Dubrovnik is very clean, so you don't have to worry. But still, it poses a big problem because this litter is not generated by us. It comes from the open sea. Another thing we have to consider is that this litter gets cleaned, the surface litter, but 94% of the litter ends up underwater. And especially, so if we consider really shallow areas, we can use divers, which are used now to in cleanup actions, and it's very effective, but most of this litter is below 40 meters. So this poses a problem that needs to be solved. One of the propositions how to solve this is through one of our projects that we recently got Sea Clear. It's a Horizon 2020 project, and I would like to show you just the motivation, because
Today's oceans contain 26 to 66 million tons of waste, most of it trapped on the sea floor. The negative impact is enormous and threatens not only marine species, but also poses issues for food safety and affects coastal tourism. An effective way of collecting litter from the seafloor is vital. Currently, seafloor litter is collected by human divers. However, this is expensive and dangerous. The Sea Clear project aims at automating the process of searching, identifying, and collecting marine litter, using a team of autonomous robots that work collaboratively. Users can define an area that they want to have cleaned. Our team of robots will then locate the litter. A robotic surface vessel acts as a hub of the system, providing power and computation. An initial scan of the sea bottom is made from this vessel, and large debris may already be seen at this stage. An observation underwater robot, whose main job is to find litter of any size, adds more details to the scan, with close-up targeted scans of the bottom. In clear water, a drone also searches for litter from the air. Identified litter is registered on a map. A collection underwater robot goes to each piece of litter on the map and grabs it with a custom-made gripper. A suction device may also be used to collect smaller pieces. The litter is collected in a basket for transportation to the shore. Whilst easy to explain, these tasks are highly challenging to implement for autonomous robots. We will rely on advanced techniques for robotic sensing and motion control, involving AI and machine learning in several key roles. For instance, one key aspect of the project is to be able to distinguish between litter and life forms. This ensures that we only collect what we want, protecting creatures and plants alike. When fully operational, the Sea Clear system aims to classify underwater litter with an 80% success rate and collect it with a 90% rate. All this at a 70% reduced cost compared to divers and without putting their lives at risk. This solution can be deployed at multiple sites simultaneously, making a global step towards keeping our oceans clean. Follow news on the seaclear-project.eu website and learn how you can contribute to making this possible.
Okay, so the developed system will be demonstrated in 2 case studies and 2 demonstration areas, because we want to push the technology towards not only having it in prototype, let's say demonstrations in our labs. At the end of the project, we'll have 2 demonstrations in 3 different sites, 1 in Hamburg, Hamburg Port, and 2 in Dubrovnik. What is typical so one of the test sites is Lokrum, which is a protected nature preserve, and is an example of a tourist case study. So some of the litter comes from, let's say, from the storms, because Lokrum acts as a defense from the waves for the city. And in this Bay of Portoj, sometimes you can find a lot of litter, although most of the underwater is very transparent and clean. And of course, some of the litter comes from tourists, because we just have a lot of people visiting Lokrum every year, which is normal, I think. There's a lot of Posidonia oceanica, which is a protected species that is all around that we can take care of. Okay. So So one of the ways, how is it cleaned now, is through volunteering groups. So this was in ocean cleanup in September of 2020, with 17 divers collected in 1 hour 88 kilos of waste, out of which 80 kilos of plastic. This is a very tedious assignment, and divers cannot work longer than that 1 hour. So basically what they can clean up in this, that's it. If by developing a robotic system, we could have autonomous robots cleaning this whenever it's needed. As a second test site is Malistone Bay as an example for agriculture. So as opposed to Lockroom, this bay, as I already said, is not so vulnerable to weather conditions. So it doesn't have the litter coming in from the open sea, but due to a long tradition of oyster harvesting and agriculture, there is a lot of material that is left down and needs to be collected. So this area here is actually our University of Dubrovnik's research lab. And we have our own concession for research on oysters, and we can test, as a testing site, we can use it. Okay. What is interesting, why we chose these two areas is in the water quality. As you can notice, sea and Lockroom is very transparent, and here it's not. So we'll have different, let's say, setups and water quality for our system to try, and the different type of litter. So for example, here you have a lot of litter that is left out from cultivating oysters, as opposed to maybe plastic bottles or glass bottles in Lockroom. Okay. So as you can see in the waste, there's mostly rubber, metal and plastic, as opposed to Lockroom where it was mostly plastic. So it's a different type of litter that needs to be dealt with. Okay. And that will be it from me today. So if you have any questions, I'm free to answer.
Dear Ivana, thank you very much. It was very interesting information, and to see that in Dubrovnik, together with other institutions, you're working on these kind of solutions, and this is definitely the future. You know, we need to have the robotic system that could really scrap the surface in a way that it can do it, as you said, when it's needed, not only in a couple of months or maybe once or twice in a year. So thank you very much. We'll go further on, as our program says. So the second topic, or it's not a topic, it's a second lecture, regarding Net Age 20 Smart Buoy, maybe I didn't say it very good, is Mr. Michele Grassi from Elements Works company. Mr. Grassi, if you're ready, if I said the name correct, so just please.
It's okay, it's okay. It's Michele, but it's...
Michele, okay, thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, so I'll try to share the screen. Let's see if I succeed in that. Can you see the presentation? I didn't hear you, but it's...
Yes.
Okay, great. So thanks for having us here, and I will briefly talk about our Net H2O smart buoys, which fit very well in the context that was presented in the previous presentation. So just a small introduction, which I think is not strictly necessary in this context, but it's useful to prepare for what I'm going to say. So data acquisition from remote locations at sea is complicated and expensive. As was mentioned before, to go at sea is risky, is expensive, and can be done only at some particular times during the season. So in many situations, it is instead useful to collect data continuously to study the quality of the water or to monitor an aquaculture installation or a tourist site. So this usually is done with devices like oceanographic buoys, multi-parametric probes or drones, which tend to be complex and expensive devices and usually need to be operated by specialized personnel. So what we try to do with the Net H2O is to develop a device which can be autonomous and doesn't need specialized personnel to operate and transmit the data. So just to mention possible applications for such a device, well, one of course is clear, is in industrial activities at sea, like aquaculture, mussel cultivation, but also desalination plants or ports and marinas or fishing areas. Of course, these devices can be applied also in other situations, like for example, to monitor a remote location, like for example, a marine preserve, where you can't or you don't want to have people because you want to maintain it in pristine state. And other situations are in sports sites, like the kite surf or a windsurf location, and people might like to know what are the conditions for the waves or the temperature, and maybe would like to know it by just looking at their mobile phone. And then in the end, of course, resorts and marinas might like to propose information on the quality of the water at their location to their potential clients or their usual clients. So in all these situations, you need a device which is simple, cheap, and can collect data from the water and transmit it remotely. So that's where we started in the development of the Net H2O. So we incorporated a lot of innovation in this device. The first and foremost is the fact that whenever you deploy something at sea, it tends to be affected very quickly by fouling. And this is a big problem if your device is supposed to operate unattended for extended periods, because your sensor, for example, might get covered by fouling and will cease to operate, or their performance will degrade rather quickly over time. And so we developed a system that we are patenting to prevent this significantly, almost completely. A second innovation is in regards to the location where you collect data from, because you might not want to collect data only from the surface, but you might want to collect it also at different depths. So in the device, we incorporated an innovation also regarding this. We acquired the rights for a patent developed in a European project, the Sea on a Chip, which concerns a robotic sensor to collect data from remote locations. And we are engineering this device to include it in our buoys as soon as possible. And well, the last thing is that our buoys are cheaper, much cheaper than the traditional solutions to these problems. And this, of course, is good. And it allows you to expand the reach for such a solution, not only to single buoys, but actually because they are cheap, they operate autonomously and they can operate it without the intervention of specialized personnel. You can think of deploying swarms or arrays. And that changes the game in terms of what you can do in terms of data collection and analysis of the data. So if you have arrays in an area, you can have a much clearer picture of the evolution of your relevant parameters, environmental or ecological parameters. And so actually this is not a theory. I want to complete by talking about a project that we are deploying as you speak in the Gulf of Trieste as part of a project between Italy and Slovenia, which is called Fish Agrotech. In this case, we deploy an array of buoys, of Net H2O buoys, which collect the data that I'm indicating in the slide. So chlorophyll A, salinity, dissolved oxygen, temperature, and they can estimate the current speed. They do this in the water column between 0 and 3 meters of depth, which is shallow, but is much better, much more significant than just collecting it at a single depth. What we do with this data, actually, the array of buoys transmit this data to land through wireless connection, and then the data is fed into a machine learning software, which uses to try and predict risk factors. This is a new area. There are many players trying to do this. We are not the only ones. And of course, being at the frontier of research, is the result is not guaranteed. So the quality of the prediction needs to be assessed on the field to understand if it's usable in an operational situation. But that's the goal, to have an operational tool which allows, in this case, mussel farms operators, to have an estimate of the risk for future harmful algal blooms, and also for other potentially harmful events that might occur in their location. So once this risk factors is above a given threshold, they might go and do a direct sampling to check, to verify the situation and possibly take action. And of course, the action that you can take in these situations varies depending on the intensity of the risk and the advance time that you have with respect to the actual occurrence of the event itself. So this is really autonomous sampling and assessment on the environment based on machine learning. So it fits very well with what was said in the previous lecture. Just to mention that, of course, these parameters are those which are relevant for mussel farms at open sea, but in the same platform you can include other sensors. For example, you could sample for phycoerythrin or maybe phycocyanin in some contexts. So it's an open platform, and you can extend it and adapt it to your situation very quickly. So I hope this was clear enough, and if there are questions, I'm here to answer them. No, if you heard me.
Thank you, Michele.
Okay.
Matteo, I don't know if you want to add something. Okay, to close this this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Otherwise, we can skip to the second part. And I just before introducing our two guests of the next part, I anticipate to Ivana that there is a question for her. It is written in Italian, so after this session we will be able to introduce it. And I just anticipate for you, Ivana, that about how the calculation for the reduction of costs of the solution compared to scuba diving has been performed. So just in general terms, okay? But then we will get back after.
So the detailed analysis will be performed during the project. So since we are developing the new system from scratch, in the year 3, one of the deliverables will be the economic assessment of the system. The goal is to go below the price of the divers. The price of the divers is very high, as you know, but we can reduce it in other, let's say if you consider how much a diver can cover and how much it costs, like considering a robotic system, there is a plus in these systems that it can run a longer time and cover larger area. So that's the main idea. But yeah, like one of the deliverables will be within the project to, let's say in detail, write this out. So maybe in a couple of years, like I'll have more, like a direct, but this is the general idea. I cannot tell you like exactly now.
Okay. So since you already performed an answer to your question, just to be, to use the same also for the other guests, I directly asked to Michele Michele Grassi that there are questions also for you. I don't know if you can read it in the chat. The first one is if your solution is commercially available.
Yes.
And please.
And I've seen the second question. It was regarding okay. One viewer mentioned the fact that the parameters that we collect seem generic. Okay, so they shouldn't be mentioned in regards to harmful algal blooms forecasting. Here is kind of delicate. It depends on how machine learning works. We are indeed collecting, let me say, generic parameters like chlorophyll A, salinity, etc. But we are going to correlate them on the time scale with the occurrence of events of algal blooms, of harmful algal blooms. And what we expect is that the hubs will have a very specific signature in terms of how these parameters vary over time. So even if they're generic parameters, and you might add to them, for example, the amount of rain that falls on the area, the amount of water that the Isonzo River brings into the Gulf, all these generic parameters will have a very specific trend, a very specific signature in the case of hubs. And the machine learning software does exactly that. It learns how to identify this specific signature and to give a warning. So you can do this even without, in theory, taking into account like chlorophyll A, which is a direct parameter for the problem at hand. You could use indirect parameters to do the same exercise. Of course, if you have direct pointers like chlorophyll A, is expected to be easier. So I hope this answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Michele. Thank you very much. I think that now we can use our next two speakers. So we enter another topic, which is about ports and offshore plants surveillance through underwater robotics and sensors. We will have here two representatives. The first one is Mr. Marco Bibuli from the National Research Council of Italy, and we'll talk about R&D for surveillance of ports and offshore plants. He will be followed by Mr. Stefano Gelli from Leonardo. And in this case, we will deepen technological innovation for above water and underwater surveillance. I ask, first of all, Michele to stop the sharing of his screen in order to allow Mr. Bibuli to share his presentation. Perfect. Thank you, Michele. Thank you very much. And now, Marco, if you're ready, you can share your screen.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
You should see the presentation now, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes. The floor
great.
is yours.
So,
thank you.
Thank you, Martina. We already know each other. We are friends for many other collaborations. So happy to see you here, and I'm really glad to be invited to this talk, which is very fruitful. And congratulations for the organization, because I know that organizing a virtual meeting like this one is not an easy task. So first of all, congratulations. I am Marco Bibuli. I work for the National Research Council of Italy, in particular in the Institute of Marine Engineering. And today I'm going to present, we were going to take a glance actually to the robotic technologies applied to ports and offshore operation, like inspection, maintenance, surveillance, and so forth. So we will discover how we can avail of the current technology in this field. In particular, I will talk about the offshore platforms, not from a strict production side. I just put this slide just to underline that the offshore deep water structure that we are actually employing, it's a small percentage of the platform that are used to extract the oil. This because, of course, extracting oil in inland, it's much simpler, while extracting something from deep water, it's really an harsh and difficult task. So we need the technology to do this. And above that, we have to keep in account of all the life cycle of an offshore platforms, starting from the planning, the construction, all the cycle of operation regarding the maintenance and inspection and so forth, and of course the shutdown and the commissioning when needed. Among this, we have to match this cycle with the different aspect, like the efficiency of the operation, which is strictly bound to the costs. Very important, the safety of the human personnel that are involved in the operation. We have to keep an eye on this aspect, and of course the environmental protection. We are producing oil, extracting oil. We have a production cycle, and we are making effects on the environment that we have to protect. So what I want to talk about in these 10 minutes is to show, starting from the consolidated solution that are currently used nowadays, how we can avail of some recent research results that can bring towards the employment of new innovative technologies in this field. So let me start from the current technology, which really is the employment of robotic platforms. It's not science fiction. They are currently used. We have been using this platform for many years. There are this machine, the usual machines that in this field is the remotely operated vehicles, ROVs. They are machines used to perform deep water operation. We can send them, we can explore, we can use manipulators to perform operation like moving valves, mounting structure, and so forth. They are precise. They can execute complex tasks. They can survive to the harsh environment without putting at risk the human lives. And of course, when we have to go down up to 1 to 3 kilometers underwater, we cannot go with men, so we have to go with machine. Of course, it's not gold all that glitters, let me say. We have some drawbacks, like needing some required personnel to actually drive, to pilot this vehicle, these robots. We have very complex logistics, because when these machines are very big, we need ships to deploy them. We need cranes. We need a lot of work, and other silly things like I wrote here the presence of the tether, which may seem like, well, and what is that? But when you deploy one vehicle at 1 kilometers of depth, you have to think that you have a long cable to provide energy and communication. And this cable, it's a problem. It can be stuck somewhere. It can act as a sail with the current. So it's a very complex things to be managed. Okay. What is the concept? This is the present, the actual situation, but we can take some ideas from other close environment, like ports, like coastal operation, where we employ different kind of vehicles. Even in the previous presentation, which was really super, already talked about autonomous systems. So we can talk about autonomous surface vehicle and autonomous underwater vehicles, where the difference from the ROVs that we can let them work autonomously, so we can program the operation that they will do. And for instance, we can perform autonomous data gathering, autonomous observation, and so forth, so they can work by themselves, and we collect the data at the end of the operation. So this is very much more stressless from the human point of view. Of course, we cannot do this in every situation. I put these 2 slides where it was a mission where I was involved to observe some underwater emission of gases, and the fact that I was there driving the vehicle, looking for a specific spot that I have to find. So I had to go blind back and forth, looking for this spot, and it was very stressful, very demanding from a human side. So what we can do when we have autonomous system is to insert strategies and intelligence in the way we perform operation. And I want to recall this aspect, which is the adaptive sampling. So instead of looking at each point where some information might be missing or might not be very interesting, we can sense the environment. We can focus on the interesting point where let me call it the gradient of the information is rising, where there is a lot of information, leaving all the other uninteresting points unseen, or we can just grab a bit of information, but the real point of interest are somewhere else. This is what we are doing in another Interreg project, which is called Matra KCP, where we are developing this kind of operation for the data gathering in ports regarding the pollution. So this is another idea that we can grab from research. Always import, but not specifically in water. We can work also on ships and of course in structures. We have experience in the development of robots able to perform inspection of structures like the walls of the ships and the ballast tanks, looking for cracks, rust, consistency of the structure without putting the man inside dangerous environment, but letting him just supervise the mission. So this is something more that we have from robotic technology. And of course, if we want to move toward the offshore operation, we have to change the concept from submerged tools like the ROV to autonomous agents, where we put the autonomy, we put the intelligence. We change the concept of pilot, which is not a pilot anymore, but a supervisor of the operation. And we can, and we have to actually develop a specific agent for the specific operation. We cannot think that a single robot can do everything. It's like a miracle, but we can develop something very specific that can do a very specific work. So we have inspection, detection, intervention, and so forth. We have different examples here. One that I want to recall is this project Maris. It's an Italian project where we developed a autonomous underwater vehicle coupled with the robotic manipulator, able to detect an object, grab it, move it, and construct in infrastructure and so forth. And of course, the direct extension is the cooperation with different robots working together, which is it's not an easy task. It's quite complex actually, and research is going in this direction. And we have internal cooperation inside the CNR, the National Research Council. We put the robotic technologies, other institutions put sensor in order to provide environmental data gathering and aggregated data construction. Just to conclude this presentation, I want to point out that on one side we have the problem, which is okay, we want to use technology to make more efficient our operation, our production line, and of course money moves the world. Let me say, it's not very nice to say, but it's the reality. So we have to keep into account the financial aspect of what we are doing, but on the very other side, we have to keep into account the society. We have to make this tool, this methodology, acceptable for people. They have to understand that they are reliable, that they can be exploitable, and environment is still an issue that we must think about. We must keep into account in everything that we do. I don't have to say that European Commission has an eye on life in water, on the earth, and the climate situation. So environmental protection is embraced by the European Commission action and many other actions. So it's really important to do this. And the line that we have to follow is to develop new way of working, keeping into account innovative solutions like robotic technologies. We have a lot of new ideas coming from research that we can employ, and of course methodologies to monitor what we are doing, monitoring the human impact on the world and protect the environment, which is very important. So with this, I close my presentation. Sorry, I took a minute, 1 minute more.
No problem. Thank you, Marco, for your presentation. Thank you for having mentioned that you are full of new ideas, because for sure we will be using, I think, all the new ideas coming from the research and academia in order to allow, hopefully, a good share of those ideas to go and reach the market. I would now give the floor to Mr. Stefano Gelli from Leonardo. So good morning. I ask you to share your screen and your presentation. And in the meantime, for any type of question, there should be for Marco Bibuli or for someone else, use again the chat. We will come back on the questions later. So please, Mr. Gelli, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Can you see the screen and can you hear me? Yes?
Yes,
okay, great.
Perfectly.
Hello, my name is Stefano Gelli. I work in Leonardo. I'm going to describe our typical solution for ports and offshore plant surveillance with above and underwater robotics and sensor. That is the solution that we put in place. Generally, Leonardo design a system every time that there is a new project. So we tend to deliver customized solution that are anyway based on some pillars, mainly based on a command and control system that we manufacture, on some specific sensors that are manufactured by ourselves, and that can be roughly described in divided into above water surveillance and underwater surveillance. So the typical problem that we face is to protect a specific location, a critical infrastructure, for example, a port, a military port, for example, from a specific threat. So every time that we do this, we perform a risk assessment. We try to identify the threats together with our customer and to design a specific solution. As I said, more or less, the solution always requires surface sensor and submarine sensors. So today I would like to describe the main pillars of this solution. The very first one is the so-called Argos radar. That is an X-band radar that is designed by ourselves, completely solid state, high performance, and we put in place some specific features that are over the horizon detection, so the capability to overcome the Earth curvature, so to detect beyond the visibility limit. The inverse synthetic aperture radar, that is the capability to detect the ship and to give an image, even if taken from the radar, of the target, and a high resolution area to better discriminate targets in a specific window. The radar is the same object, the same product that we deploy both on board and on the surface on shore, and has two dedicated receiving channels for aerial and surface targets. This is to discriminate between threats that come from the air and threats that come from the surface. In this slide, I just summarize the performance. A very small surface target at 3 square meters is a rubber boat, more or less, can be detected at 28 nautical miles. A very small aircraft, that is a 1 square meter air target, can be detected at 25 nautical miles. Of course, a radar is only able to detect something, but it is not able to say what it is or who it is. So it doesn't face the classification, the recognition and identification problem. So the second pillar of the surface surveillance are cameras. We deploy a number of cameras, and we generally tend to use commercial off-the-shelf equipment. In some specific cases, in particular for offshore platform protection, we use our own product, that is the Nereo ultra long range camera. A camera, I say camera, but actually I should say electro-optical system. So something that consists of a daylight sensor, of an infrared sensor, and very often of a laser rangefinder to detect the distance of the target. In this slide, we see more or less the typical picture from the infrared sensor. The performance can be roughly described in detection at the 6 kilometers, identification at 6 kilometers, classification are about 10, 15 kilometers, and the detection at for fishing vessels or very small targets at 32, 33 kilometers, more or less. So these are the two main pillars for the surface surveillance. On the cameras, we have developed a special algorithm that is based on artificial intelligence that is able to detect, classify, and track the targets that have been detected. In a port environment, there are, of course, a lot of obstacles that have to be overcome. So, for example, the coastline detection, the sea coastline. So we have to remove a lot of, we have trained the algorithm to remove a lot of artifacts that are not useful for our task, of course. And finally, the camera on its own, so without the aid of a human operator or of the radar, is able to detect a target, classify it, saying, for example, if it is a tanker, a small boat, a large boat, sailing boat, and perform a tracking, fusing the information with the one coming from radars and IS. The final aim of all this processing is to give the operator a complete picture of what is happening around the infrastructure around the port. For the underwater surveillance, we generally deploy a set of sensors. Also, in this case, we use commercial equipment and proprietary equipment. Here, I'm going to describe the typical solution and one of the most peculiar proprietary equipment. So the underwater surveillance is based mainly on geomagnetic sensors, physical barriers, and diver detection sonars. Here we have an example of a network of sonars and a physical barrier that we have created. Actually, the sonar can be arranged in networks, but the very big problem with sonars, with diver detection sonar, because this is the threat that we generally face, is that they suffer from shallow waters and low depth sea or high temperatures. So in specific regions, in particular in the Middle East, they are not effective. So the typical solution that we use to face this problem is to deploy additional sensors, in particular underwater cameras and ROVs, generally commercial equipment. But for ROV, we have also developed a special, very special unit that is called VFIDES, and that has been developed in Italy for environmental monitoring, mainly for environmental monitoring. VFIDES is a carrier that can be used both as a AUV or ROV, and it can be equipped with different sensors. Today, it is equipped with sonars, acoustic sensors, chemical sensors, geomagnetic sensors, and acoustic sensors. So finally, it is powered by a battery with electrical engines, and it is a range of 10 kilometers, more or less. As I said, it can be controlled from a remote operator, or it can be programmed to move autonomously in a specific region. These are the main pillars that we use to create the system and to protect the physical infrastructures that we have generally in Italy, for example, in Taranto or in Genova or in many other projects around the world. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gelli. Thank you for your presentation. I don't know if from the audience there are some questions for our speakers, for the last two as well for the first two. In any case, in the meantime, I have probably one question that fits for all, because this is something that is in my mind in this moment. I imagine that for all your solutions, you all presented solutions. So you design and you imagine some scenarios, and then you go and try to design the potential solution. How much, my question is, how much the specific location, I mean geographical location, in which your solution will be performing its activity, whether it could be observation, collection of litter, surveillance, or whatever, is affecting the solution itself. So in case one potential other area will be asking for the same solution to be applied in another place, how much is it difficult to customize the solution itself for a new area, geographical area? I don't know if who wants to start, but in general, I think that this question fits for all your solutions, because you presented some specific objects and products, some often linked to some specific places. Okay, I don't know if someone wants to start. Otherwise, maybe we can follow. I don't know the order. I don't know, Ivana, if you want to start, or Michele. Sure. So please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a very good point that you're raising. So the goal of our system that I mentioned in the Sea Clear project, at least, is to be independent on the location. That's why we have 3 distinct demonstration scenarios. It will be hard, very hard. These are not trivial tasks to deal with, but our goal is, I mean, the goal by the end of the project is to make a system that will be able to perform in Adriatic, which is a really nice and transparent sea, and in the port of Hamburg, where you have the River Elbe, which is very, so it looks like as if you put a handful of sand and you cannot use a camera there. So it's a totally different environment. So the goal is to make one system that will work in these 2 extreme areas.
Thank you. Michele or Marco, who wants to?
I can go on if it is fine.
Yes, okay, it's fine.
Of course, we try to develop a general solution that could be exploitable everywhere. Of course, you have to match the specific conditions. So as I said in the presentation, it is better to specify the goal and to customize the system, because it will almost perfectly fit with your specification. From different point of view, from a point of view of strategies and algorithms and intelligence, imagine to take an autonomous robot capable of gathering data in open seas, and you put it in a port. But you need maps, you need knowledge of the port, you need the knowledge of the traffic. If the system is not connected with all the traffic, it will crash into something. So it maybe the specific action can be carried out, but in another environment it will be distracted by a ship or crashing into a quay. Another aspect is the hardware itself. I mean, if I use the same vehicle that is operated in open waters and I put it in a port, the port probably is full of iron or metallic structure, and if I use a magnetic compass, it will get crazy and it will start turning around something, and so I have also hardware problems. So of course the geographical location or the environment where I exploit my robot is affecting the way I develop my system. So as I said, the dream is to have the perfect robot capable of everything, but the reality is that you have to raise your sleeves and work on that. Yeah.
Okay.
If I can answer,
Stefano.
can you see? Yeah, the same more or less applies to us. In our case, as I said, the pillars are more or less always the same. We can choose among different classes of sensors. So we can put high performance radar, low performance radar, normal radars. There is another, so environment is critical, of course. There is another aspect that must be taken into account in our case, that is the type of threat that we want to face. So in some cases, we have to just survey a specific area. In other cases, we have to react to specific for example, terroristic attacks. And so we must, what we put in place actually is our expertise in detecting all this peculiarity and to design a system. And it takes, just to give a number, it can take 1 year to take the existing system and bring it somewhere else and make it operational. It's a long process, very complicated, and unfortunately, there is nothing that can be easily replicated.
Okay. I don't know if also Michele wants to add something. I'm not sure. I don't see him, but so if
you see me,
yes. Yes, perfect.
So yes, in our case, the system has 2 levels of let's say customization. One is on the hardware level, and one is on the backend, the machine learning. So on the hardware level, of course, you can customize the type of sensor that you have on board. If you want, for example, for optical sensors, you can choose different frequencies in the excitation light to detect different parts of the phytoplankton or other components of the water color. And this is, in a sense, the easy part. The more complex part is the machine learning, because machine learning takes time to train. For example, the system that I was mentioning before for harmful algal blooms, we think that it will take up to a year of training on data to get to a level of performance that is acceptable. So if you were to change the context, especially in locations like the Gulf of Trieste, but other locations, maybe there is an island close by, etc., the specifics of the location will get into the prediction. The markers that the system can identify depend strongly on the geography, on the context, on the rivers around, on how much the water affects, on how much cultivation is on inland, which brings then the nitrogen in the water when it rains. So all these things get into the mix and allow the system to make predictions, but they change from location to location. So you definitely have to retrain, as is usually said, the system in the new circumstances. Maybe you can do something in between. You can use a half-trained system and just do a partial train, but it takes time. Okay, so you can adapt to location, but you have to put in consideration that it will take time to retrain the machine learning for that specific context. So you can do it, but it takes time.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I somehow expected the answers, but I wanted to hear that directly from you, because I know that probably you already have had this experience with all your project and the tests that you performed. I see that there are 2 more questions for you. The first one is about the relationship that you have with policymakers. So in terms of I imagine the definition of the solutions and also application of the solutions. And the second one states where your come from, if the public sector, and how do you define the need or a problem on what you base the solution, or if it's strictly coming from the client. Just to be sure, Roberta and Matteo, the question is for all the speakers and then not dedicated to one of them in particular, right? If I'm not.
Yeah.
Yes, I confirm.
Okay. So if someone wants to start sharing their experience in terms of commitment, basically, because
can
please
jump in if you want. Regarding the relationship with policymaker, of course, we have to. We are in touch. There is always a will to define common strategies, common direction. It's not easy, because on one side there are high level trajectories, and on the other one there is the need to find a specific solution for a problem, and we have to match everything inside a law that doesn't exist. When we talk about I talk from the point of view of a technical engineer in the field of marine robotics, but when we talk about exploitation of marine robotics, we have to keep in account that there is not a strict regulation. Actually, putting at sea something autonomous is not well defined. It's not like aerial drones that are covered with all the aeronautical regulation. The same does not apply for autonomous system at sea. So as soon as you are linked to your robot with a physical link like a cable, that's fine, that's part of the ship or the ground station. But when you leave something moving alone, it's a limbo, it's like something not well defined. So also working, really exploiting in terms of production, in terms of a product, innovative solution like robotic technologies, it's not easy, and we need to match with people like RINA, like DNVGL, like Norsk Veritas Classification Society, in order to also establish a way of working. So this is a point that I wanted to highlight. So I shocked myself.
Thank you.
Okay, I try to answer to the questions. In our case, Leonardo as a company takes part to the most important working groups that are set by the policymakers. As Marco was saying, there is a very high level of policymaker of philosophy that describe how to perform, how to face some particular problems in the marine environment. And then there is the specific problem, the specific customer. So we take part to NATO group, IALA group, IMO group, European Working Commission. So we have people in Leonardo that tries to gather all this information. But finally, when we design the system, we always speak with the customer and we face a specific problem in a framework of rules, but a specific problem. The second question, we as Leonardo, we generally work with the governments. So our main customers are Coast Guards, Coastal Safety, Guardia Costiera in Italia, so Coast Guard, and Navy people. So we have this kind of customers, of course, that have the need to satisfy a specific solution for their critical infrastructures. Sometimes we work with private entities, for example, in Italy with Enel, to protect power plants that are close to the coast.
Thank you. Thank you
very much.
Ivana or Michele, do you want to add something to these questions?
Sure, I can add just a little small thing. So as Marco said, the regulation for autonomous systems is not well defined. So for now, like at least in our, let's say, case, we are in line with policymakers. So we always try to include them into our, either directly into our projects or keep them in the loop regarding the demonstrations. But once these systems go into the everyday use, there will rise the need, the same as for UAVs. While they were still in the labs, everything was fine. But once they started like being used by, you know, like average user, then the need for strict policies will occur. So this will happen probably soon, maybe sooner than some people think, but it's very important to include them in all the projects, because for now, I mean, until now, all the marine technology has been not so accessible to, let's say, clients. And now it's getting, because we see a lot of solutions that are becoming more and more available. And once we start like employing them and deploying them into our seas, like the need for policies and strict regulation for this will occur. And for clients, I mean, we are a research institution. So, I mean, mostly it's a combination of needs, and we are focused more on research than on the client side. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ivana. And okay, Michele, if you want to.
Yes, just one thing. In our case, is somewhat simpler because our devices look like buoys. They are very different from traditional buoys, but they look like they are tethered to the ground usually, and they float usually. And so in terms of policy and authorizations, we haven't encountered problems until now. You go through the standard authorizations for positioning a buoy and everything goes fine. Once you start to have something which maybe detaches and reattaches to the tether or is a drifter, then problems will certainly arise. And for example, in the drifter configuration, I'm sure that, for example, in Italy, Capitaneria di Porto will have a say and will, in regards to security of navigation. So we haven't gone there yet, but we also think that it will take time to get a common ground on that. And so that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Michele. I don't know, Matteo, if you want to add something. As far as I have heard, probably up to now, policymakers are still somehow intended as, especially for the regulation side. So for what is linked to all the rules that we need in terms of putting something at sea, this aspect. And maybe from our point of view, also the part really linked to the public policymakers, so the public authorities, local governments, and so on, intended as direct, I would say, clients in terms of asking for a specific solution. So be opening some real commitment for having a specific solution dedicated. Probably something that still has to come, and on which we have to, I would say, push a little bit with our activity in InnovaMare also.
I just want to comment on that, because what you said, Martina, and we have the same problem in Italy and Croatia as well. It's not the same thing in Germany or in Austria or other countries. The public sector is always coming last. It is not the pusher. It is not the one who is asking for the private sector to go in a direction where they see the need, or they see the advantage in the future that we need from that. So if you see the strategy of Germany for 2030, they're putting in strategy mostly the public sector who is pushing the private sector, let's say, in green technologies. And it says, it has a statement in that strategy that German government will be the one who will push the private sector more towards the green technologies. So this kind of approach we need more in Croatia and Italy as well. And through InnovaMare project, we want to build that through for the sea pollution area and the robotics and sensors to get the government working more proactively, not just be making certificates or policies at the end of the time. So it's a position at the moment, but we have to change it. We have to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I think that well, there are no other questions. I do not see any other question. I thank once again our speakers of today, of this morning session, and I just invite to be here again at 2 p.m. for the afternoon session of our roundtable. I don't know if I'm forgetting something, so I ask Roberto if I'm forgetting some relevant information about the organization. But
No. You don't forget anything, Martina. Thanks a lot. I take the opportunity to thank the speakers. I'm so sorry that if in these days I stress you concerning the presentation or access to Zoom, but it's very difficult to manage the roundtable in a virtual way. But thank you a lot, and I will inform you concerning the position paper that we implemented during the project. Thank you.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.